far more than 87 million Facebook users may have had their data harvested by Cambridge Analytica. That, according to former company insider turned whistleblower Brittany Kaiser at a UK Parliament committee meeting yesterday. She also explained some of the company's data collection tactics.
But I would see questionnaires. For example, there was one called the Sex Compass to find out what your personal preferences were privately. And then there was another one on your music personality. These applications were designed specifically to harvest data from individuals using Facebook as the tool. It can be inferred or implied that there were many additional individuals as opposed to just the ones through Alexander Kogan's test whose data may have been compromised.
Since leaving Cambridge Analytica earlier this year, the former director of business development has been critical of the company's tactics. Kaiser is now working alongside Jeffrey Wernick, an early investor in Uber and Airbnb, on initiatives to improve data collection transparency. Both Brittany and Jeffrey join us now in a first on CNBC interview. Good morning and welcome to both of you. Brittany, first of all, doing great. I want to start with you. So more than 87 million people are alarmed about Cambridge Analytica, but I want to put the brakes on that a moment because the real issue with the Kogan data sets, wasn't it, is that they were collected under the pretense that they weren't going to be used for commercial purposes at all. There wasn't a problem with having quizzes that harvested people's information. Lots of people were doing that. So are you saying these other Cambridge Analytica quizzes were above board legit and maybe people just didn't understand how the data was being used? Not necessarily against the terms of service, just that's how it worked.
Of course, I think there's a very low amount of data literacy around the world. When you agreed to terms and conditions of using a Facebook app, such as these quizzes, which were very popular a couple years ago, personality quizzes such as which Disney princess are you? These were created by probably thousands of companies around the world, and you agree to giving your data when you sign in using your Facebook login. Now, I think it's also important to point out that that's really the tip of the iceberg. Facebook collects a fraction of the amount of data that companies like Google collect on you. So I think the real conversation is a little bit bigger, which is the lack of transparency around what data is collected about individuals and how that data is used and monetized.
Yeah, and Jeffrey, there's some pretty strong language being used right now to describe the collectors of data. I believe you've used some of it. I saw a headline that you called companies that collect data rapists. I don't know if that is what you actually said, but I mean, there are a lot of companies that collect data and have been for a long time. Amazon collects data. Walmart collects data. Do you expect those companies that collect data and use it for internal purposes to compensate people?
I think if the data is used specifically for in-house users, I don't expect there to be any compensation because they're not monetizing the data. I think if there's any effort to monetize the data, then the question is who owns the data and who has the right to monetize it. So it just depends upon what the use is. If to the extent that somebody's using the data to sell advertising space back, then there's compensation involved. If it's using the data specifically for them to understand you, if they use the data for them to understand you better and provide a better service specifically for you, and don't use anything other than to provide you value with respect to your relationship, just one-on-one with that firm, no, I don't see any problem with that. But
Amazon is using it to market third-party sellers' products to you. Amazon's also using it to market third-party sellers.
Again, if they're using it to market products, the only appropriate use of the information is I bought a book and that's it, or I bought whatever I bought on the platform. If they're using that information then to sell more products on that platform, then they're using my information to make their platform more valuable without compensating me. So again, if I'm an input into their production function, I should get compensated for being an input into their production function. So these platforms are kind of unique. In the past, we were not inputs into people's production functions. Now we are an important input into production functions, but we're not getting any compensation along the way. And so so that's why it becomes an issue, which I referred to earlier, is it's an issue of property rights. You know, we have a problem of the fact is that just like the tragedy of the commons. We don't know how to define this, so given the absence of defining it, we're then being given the curator of the platform essentially ownership of that information. So I don't see anywhere where in any contracts that they basically become the owner of the information. And if they're just a curator, then anybody should be able to call up Amazon and say, gee, you know what, I want Jeffrey Wernick's data as well. You know, it might be useful for me as well. Give it to me as well. So the point is, it's our data. We own it. And to the extent that it's used out of the context of just us buying something, you know, then the fact is, then they should come back and say to us, I'd like permission to do it, and I'll compensate you for it. Simple.
Brittany, I know you guys, are sitting down and talking to us today because you are looking to sort of change the way data is handled and bringing the, control of that data back into users' own hands. But whether we are talking about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, or as you mentioned, the tip of the iceberg, the amount of data that Google collects, across the board, looking at many different industries, isn't the genie already out of the bottle in terms of how much data is out there on consumers already? I mean, how could you possibly rein that back in?
So it's not about reining it back in, but moving forward from where we are today. If we start to view our digital assets, our personal data, as our property, then we can start to change the terms and conditions, the social contract, and the actual legal contracts that we have with our usage of these different platforms. So as Jeffrey said, if companies are going to be monetizing our data, we should share in that. It's the same as an Airbnb model where they allow you to monetize the value of your property, which is a physical property, a house or an apartment. You are given transparency for what people want to use your property for. They let you know, you agree on a price, and you're paid before you hand away the keys. Right now, when you sign up to terms and conditions, not only do most individuals not have the ability to fully comprehend what they're agreeing to, but there are not full, transparent permission structures into what that data collection can then be used for onwards. And that's where the big controversy comes in. It's not that Cambridge Analytica or any other data analytics companies were breaking laws, because I believe that they weren't in the most case. None of these companies are breaking laws. They're doing something that is legal. And our legislative and regulatory frameworks have not caught up with where we are with these technologies. So because the regulators are always going to be behind, the legislators are going to be behind, we need to change the model with which we're interacting with companies that are doing the data collection.
So Brittany, nobody forced people to take these quizzes, and I know, maybe I've been in the technology game for a while, nothing's for free. Some of us knew information was being harvested here. Can we protect people from themselves truly? I mean, say they own their information and Facebook says, great, it's your information. If you want to use Facebook, you need to give us this information, which is kind of a version of what they already say. Can we stop that transaction from taking place? Say, no, wait, you really don't want to be telling them that because they're going to use it to make lots of money and not give you any. At a certain point, isn't it just relying on the user to get a little bit wiser to the game?
Of course, and that's why I said this is also a problem of data literacy. Individuals need to be educated about what this actually means. If your data is your property and other people are using it, what transparency is there? What kind of permissions and permission-based structures are available for you to make those decisions? Right now you have some privacy functions and terms and conditions which are constantly changed by Facebook, by Google, by all of the platforms that you use on a day-to-day basis. So it's very hard to keep up. It's a huge gray area that you don't understand all of the types of data that are collected about you and how those are going to be used. So if we're going to enter into a new set of terms and conditions, a new social contract where individuals have visibility over what's collected and knowledge of what that could be potentially be used for, then individuals can opt in. In Europe, that's already part of the law. It's just the United States of America where we're a default opt-in country. You're already opted in unless you opt out.
I have something to add on that. I disagree with the frame.
Well,
okay, if I put my car in a parking lot, that doesn't give the right of the parking lot to sell my car. Okay, I'm only giving them the right to park my car, not to sell my car. So I think the way you framed it is incorrectly.
Well, it is an important topic that people are paying a lot more attention to now. because of the recent disclosures. Thank you, Brittany and Jeffrey.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.